Hey friends, I'm Mike, a late identified autistic adult, and on today's Halloween themed episode, we'll be talking about that I Am Autism video from Autism Speaks. Quick pause, if you've been out this Halloween, you may have seen these blue pumpkins popping up, and if you have, please don't buy them. They started a few years ago as a social media trend, and they seem to be taking over and displacing the similarly coloured teal pumpkins that are used to indicate food allergies or non-food items. It's difficult or impossible to tell the difference in the evenings anyway. Never mind asking autistic kids to have different stuff to their peers. It singles them out too, you know. While part of me wishes that I had my diagnosis, or better, realised why I was different to most of my peers, I'm bloody glad I didn't have to carry around a brightly coloured, unusual looking pumpkin and have to answer all of the inevitable, but well-meaning I guess, questions. Why is your pumpkin different? It seems to have been started by the mother of an autistic son who wanted something to indicate that he can't say trick or treat. Does he have to? What if his timing is a little off? It's hardly a performance at the Royal Albert Hall. At the time of the blue pumpkin trend being reported in the mainstream media, her son was around 4 years old. So he'd have to have at least one adult with him in any case. It doesn't mean anything other than be kind anyway. As though people are being unkind to kids with traditionally coloured pumpkins. It's nuts. Actually, maybe it's not nuts in the teal coloured pumpkins, but you know what I mean. Teal pumpkins indicate food allergies and are usually filled with non-food items. You know, stickers, cheap toys, stocking filler stuff, that kind of thing. And they're usually left outside the door or offered to trick-or-treaters. Since the trick-or-treat activity is primarily about candy, and teal kind of means not candy, that works. The children with food allergies don't have to carry the pumpkins, they can just look out for them and choose the non-food items from them. They don't have to out themselves with a visual label that says, I'm autistic. Not everyone wants to or is able to out themselves. The blue pumpkins are a solution looking for a problem, and they conflict with the teal pumpkins, especially in the dark. So, PSA over, back to the video. Autism Speaks was founded by Bob and Suzanne Wright in 2005 and quickly became what they call the world's leading autism science and advocacy organisation. They're the world's leading something. Possibly the world's leading fear-based narrative and corporate brand awareness rather than meaningful support and inclusion. We're getting ahead of ourselves. Their approach and messaging has been widely criticised, including by me on this channel. Their messaging often portrays autism as a devastating condition that needs to be cured or prevented, rather than what it is, a natural variation of human neurology. And their organisation is led by a team of corporate America types, none of whom are autistic. Yes, you heard that right. Not one of the Autism Speaks executive team are autistic. As an ex-charity director myself, working with animal shelters, and that, by the way, is one of the reasons for the very many cats, the executive leadership are the bosses of the charity. They're appointed by the board, who meet 4 times a year, but it's the executive leadership who have day-to-day control of the organisation as a whole. The board are responsible above them for the good governance of the charity. Now, the board only meet about 4 times a year, and only one of the 28 people on the board. 28 people is a huge board, like 4x bigger than it needs to be. And an odd number is usually better as well, for voting reasons, but only one of the 28 people on their board is autistic. How's that for an autism advocacy organisation? It's 3.5% of the governance representation of Autism Speaks is autistic themselves. And this is opposed to 100% of my channel, so please feel free to stim the subscribe and like buttons for me, please. Autism Speaks, in their latest published accounts, spent over $70 million, the majority of which are operational costs and self-promotion. Over 99% of their budget goes on essentially corporate awareness rather than support. They spent 0.6% of their total budget towards things like family service grants, and this is the only line in their accounts that's clearly identified as direct support. And if you want to access this grant and these supports, well, you'll need to fill out this web form on their website. It's clunky, outdated, and gives no guarantee of support. For a non-profit supposedly dedicated to autistic individuals and their families, that's disappointing, to say the least. I mean, especially one with a £1 million annual software budget. Maybe they're getting the software from Boeing. Here we go.
I am autism. I'm visible in your children, but if I can help it, I am invisible to you until it's too late.
Oh, please. Autism isn't some sneaky villain lurking in the shadows. It's not something that waits to pounce on parents when they least expect it. Autism is a neurotype. It is something people are born with. There's no too late here, except maybe for late identified autistic adults, perhaps. Autistic people have been around forever. It's society that's just been too late in accepting us.
I know where you live. And guess what? I live there too.
1 second. Just looking for the autism. Apparently it lives here. Autism isn't some bad roommate moving in, uninvited, just with all their stuff one day. Autism isn't something that's separate from autistic people. It is part of us. It's part of who we are. I'm right here at home existing as me, not as some sinister force trying to ruin your life. It's not a horror movie.
I hover around all of you. I know no color barrier, no religion, no morality, no currency.
Okay, congratulations. You just described people. Autism exists across all demographics, just like every other aspect of humanity. We're diverse, and that's a good thing. But why turn this into some sort of eerie warning? It's not like autism is a malevolent force planning a global takeover.
I speak your language fluently, and with every voice I take away, I acquire yet another language. These
may be, or ostensibly are, autistic people being filmed here. It's not clear that their permission was sought to be used for this purpose. I mean, if they were told, hey, you're going to be in a film raising awareness about autism, that would be duplicitous, because what they're actually being used for is some fear-based horror narrative, some kind of weird B-movie for a charity that seeks primarily, I mean, it's not about what they say, they speak a lot, don't they? But really it should be called not an autism charity spending all the money on ourselves. That's kind of right? You judge people by their actions. You can judge people by their actions. The same applies to organizations. We can judge them by their deeds, what they're doing. It's very clear that they are a self-interested corporation. Great. I mean, all corporations are self-interested, but they barely, you barely get the scraps from their table if you're autistic.
Voice I take away, I acquire yet another language.
Hold up. Autism isn't taking anyone's voice. If anything, society's refusal to provide communication support takes voices away. Non-speaking autistic people have always had things to say. It's society that needs to catch up and listen in different ways, whether it's via AAC devices, bit of patience there, sign language, or any other method of communication. Autism isn't their snatching voices. Society's lack of understanding is.
I work very quickly. I work faster than pediatric AIDS, cancer,
Really?
and diabetes combined.
Comparing autism to terminal illnesses, that's not just misleading, it's really offensive. For all parties, actually. Autism isn't a disease. It's not something to be fought or worked against. Autistic people are not victims of some tragic fate. We're human beings with our own unique strengths and challenges. Autism isn't a disease, curable like chlamydia or otherwise.
And Autism aus chlamydia. Why is autism so cool at the moment?
Because it's funny.
Correct.
And if you are happily married, I will make sure that your marriage fails.
Okay, yeah, because clearly relationship problems are autism's fault, right? Wrong. If marriages or partnerships struggle, it's not because one person or the other or their children happen to be autistic. Autism isn't some kind of marriage-wrecking gremlin. Don't forget that there is a genetic component to autism, and often adults seek an adult autism assessment after one of their children has been identified first. And Hans Asperger in his 1944 paper noted that many of the fathers of the children he studied showed similar personality traits. He suggested first that there was a hereditary component to autism. That observation was groundbreaking for its time, but it's since been supported by modern genetic research. Obviously, you don't have to be happily married to have kids, but relationship breakdown is not necessarily a result of autism.
Your money will fall into my hands and I will bankrupt you for my own self-gain.
This one's ironic. Autism Speaks is the one raking in millions through fear-based campaigns like this, and yet less than 1% of their budget goes towards actual support for autistic families. So they say, we have to take their word for it. Autism doesn't bankrupt people, broken healthcare and lack of access to support does.
I don't sleep, so I make sure you don't either.
Every line of this is awful. Sleep issues can be part of the autistic experience for sure. But it's not because autism itself has some evil, sleep-depriving agenda. It's because, again, society doesn't make space for different needs, different routines, different ways of being. We basically work a 9 till 5 factory week. That is how Western, in fact, kind of almost global society is structured. If you're a biphasic sleeper or a night owl, you're kind of screwed. Stop framing it like we're plotting sleepless nights for everybody.
I will make it virtually impossible for your family to easily attend a temple, a birthday party, a public park, without a struggle, without embarrassment, without pain.
Who's causing the struggle here? My mother has been a wheelchair user for the past 17 years, and some public buildings, even things like our local coffee shop, have either stairs or doorway thresholds that are difficult or sometimes impossible to access. That's why I use the analogy of being a wheelchair user and every building having only stairs. What's causing the problem? This is called the social model of disability, and it's an opposite to the medical model. It's not autism, it's an inaccessible society that doesn't account for sensory needs or alternative social norms. Public spaces are challenging because they aren't designed for neurodiversity, not because autistic people somehow want to cause problems, or even do cause problems. So much stuff, by the way. This is Autism Speaks. It's also their culture. It's their culture has been, even if they were to change on a dime right now. It's 15 years of silence on this from Autism Speaks, by the way. Many times when autism is discussed in the scientific literature or even in the cultural narrative, as per Autism Mom and so on, that kind of culture, is because it's described and it's defined as problems that autistic people cause for neurotypicals, or for their carers, or for their parents, or for their society, or for their workplace, or for their residential service that they're in, right? That's how autism is often defined. And it's weird. We don't define maleness as being the predominant gender in prison, do we? Do we? Should we? Should we start talking about how men cause all the physical crime, or most of the physical crime in the world, and start changing that now? It's weird, right? It sounds strange. You can hear me talking about it, and it sounds really weird. So don't talk about autistic people in that way. It's really strange.
You have no cure for me. Your scientists don't have the resources, and I relish their desperation.
A cure? We don't need a cure because autism isn't a disease. We don't need to cure maleness. We don't need to cure femaleness. We don't need to cure autism. The only thing that needs curing is society's outdated ableist mindset that frames neurodiversity as a whole as a tragedy. The real desperation here is society clinging to the idea that people have to be fixed to be valued.
Your neighbors are happier to pretend that I don't exist, of course, until it's their child.
Oh, bit eugenicist there.
I have no interest in right or wrong. I derive great pleasure out of your loneliness. I will fight to take away your hope. I will plot to rob you of your children and your dreams. And you are scared. And you should be. I am autism. You ignored me. That was a mistake.
That was a mistake. No. The real mistake is this ad. And also the subsequent apology. We'll get to it. Hold on. The mistake was ignoring autistic voices when creating this campaign. Ignoring the reality that autistic people don't need a spotlight for awareness, but more a platform for acceptance and support. Imagine if instead of the expensive events and galas that Autism Speaks likes to run for its corporate benefactors, you put that money into helping actually autistic people. Instead of research that focuses on a cure or an in vitro test of autism, that you research the effects of aging and employment and social factors affecting autistic people over 18, say. The rest of the video continues with a sort of pseudo-religious argument that I'll spare you, but if you want the full Halloween Horror Fest experience, it is linked in the description below. So there you have it, folks. Autism Speaks decided to roll out the fear machine, painting autism as a demon to fight rather than a natural human variation to understand. Ads like this don't support autistic people, they scare parents, isolate kids, and uphold some really awful stigma that we're all trying to break down. Autism doesn't take away voices, it doesn't destroy marriages, and it definitely isn't out to make people's lives miserable. Autism is just one way of being human, and autistic people deserve respect, opportunity, and real advocacy, not this melodramatic horror movie nonsense. Autism Speaks apology. 15 years after this commercial ended, Autism Speaks published an article on their website apologising for the original campaign commercial. Now, I'm working off the Google index date of the 2nd of April here, and the Internet Archive also first archived and indexed this page on the 17th of May. This is 2024. Now, that's relevant because the 2nd of April was World Autism Awareness Day, and it's possible that they published the article then to leverage the increased traffic on that day. Autism Speaks does tend to do this around the end of March, beginning of April. They say, since our founding, we have worked hard to accurately portray the wide range of experiences one may have with autism. It's never autistic people, it's with autism. They have the autism. The autism is attached to them and must be removed. Anyway, and unfortunately, sometimes we have missed the mark. There are things that we did years ago that, due to our deeper understanding of autism today, we would never consider doing now, and for that we apologise. Well, it took them 15 years, and they're making it sound like it was a minor blip on their radar. Notice the phrasing, by the way. We apologise to those who we have offended with it. And that feels like a sorry you feel that way kind of thing, doesn't it? Rather than a real admission of harm. And they didn't just offend people. Who cares about the offence? They alienated, stigmatised and scared families. They are a multi-million dollar, two-figure millions per year people spend on this organisation, which they then consume themselves and run themselves events and pat themselves on the back. But anyway, they're a huge organisation, and they scared families by presenting autism as this weird villain. Sometimes in the UK, our tabloid newspapers, the sensational red tops especially, will post outrageous claims, lies, if you will, about people in the public eye. Eventually, after prolonged complaints and legal action, the papers will apologise for their mistake. They'll have to. The regulators will make them do it. Now, the original lie might have been on the front page, but the apology will be buried in small print, a few pages into the paper, where nobody really looks anyway. A bit like this page on their website, which appears when you search I Am Autism in a search engine, but is not in any way very prominent on their website or marketing materials. And that's what Autism Speaks' apology feels like. If they genuinely mean it, they should run a TV ad campaign. Do it there, and not hide behind this mealy-mouthed apology. We have shifted our messaging away from the negative, fear-based narrative in the video. Today, we're focusing on celebrating the strengths, talents, and contributions of autistic people, while also acknowledging the challenges that they and their loved ones face. It took over a decade to reach this point, 15 years. And even now, the celebration seems to be thin at best. Autism Speaks still spends the bulk of its resources on awareness campaigns and branding, not on direct support or resources for autistic people. This is in their accounts. This is what they tell us, if you want to look. Links in the description. They say that they are focused on celebrating strengths, but where's the actual action to back it up? They claim to focus on strengths and contributions, but the organisation's structure and funding priorities still largely reflect a corporate agenda rather than genuine support. We work closely with our autistic employees and members of the community to ensure that the content we're sharing is respectful and represents the diverse experiences and perspectives of people across the full spectrum. Let's talk numbers. Autism Speaks has a single autistic person on its board, and that representation was only added after years of criticism. And they only meet 4 times a year. That's 3.5% representation on the board and 0% on the executive team who really run things. So when they say they work closely with autistic employees and members of the community, it rings really hollow. Real representation would mean autistic people guiding decisions at every level, not token representation. Autistic people setting the priorities for the organisation. But they don't. They're not. It's not about the autistic people. And, across the full spectrum, this line implies they're listening to the whole community, but their messaging and resource allocation still focus heavily on families and caregivers. well over autistic voices. Autistic-led advocacy groups offer far more genuine representation and community support than Autism Speaks ever has. This apology reads like a carefully crafted PR statement. There's no specificity, no detailed commitment to action, and no acknowledgement of the many years that autistic advocates and allies have had to push back against Autism Speaks' harmful messaging. They apologise for offending people rather than for stigmatising and marginalising autistic individuals, which shows that they're still more concerned with managing public perception than making real structural changes. Autism Speaks' spending highlights a corporate-driven approach focused on brand visibility and fundraising rather than impactful support for autistic community. Autism Speaks' apology is a weak attempt at damage control rather than a true reckoning. They gloss over the harm they've done, use vague language to avoid taking full responsibility, and offer no concrete changes to back up their claims of this newfound understanding. An apology means nothing without action, and until Autism Speaks radically changes its priorities and puts autistic voices at the centre, this apology is just, maybe that's Autism Speaks, maybe they're here. Maybe they're coming for me. What's next for Autism Speaks? Autism Speaks launched their Emerging Leaders programme last month. They call it a group of passionate advocates under 40. Autistic UF. Dedicated to changing the future of the organisation. Championing fresh perspectives that represent the diversity of the spectrum, the group's mission is to ensure that Autism Speaks reflects the current values and needs of the autism community while advocating the evolving narrative of autism to younger generations. It's always amusing how they always say autism community. They don't like the word autistic, they like the word autism. Autism, they don't like the term autistic. Interesting, right? Check out this line. We provide insights that bridge the gap between past perceptions and the current realities of Autism Speaks' work, updating misconceptions and broadening understanding amongst our peers. Past perceptions. Misconceptions. They're really working hard on that this year, 2024. You know, this sort of fake apology and then this sort of misconception stuff. Trying to get young people in, trying to look cool. Look. Do you know what they're going to do next? The executive team are going to start wearing their baseball caps on backwards.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
These people have absolutely no executive power or control over the organisation at all. They're basically interns. Realistically, with Autism Speaks having such a heavy corporate America leadership, the people working in their Emerging Leaders programme, they are actually quite well suited to network themselves into some role at one of the board members' many companies. If you're watching this and you're one of Autism Speaks' new emerging leaders, tasked with managing the misconceptions and improving the PR, why don't you ask the board how much of their multi-million-dollar salary and remuneration budget that you're going to get? I bet it's nothing, and you're being paid in exposure. Am I right? I think I've been really clear in this video on my views. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? If you do, give me a timestamp. It really does help me if I'm going to reply to you to know what part of the video you disagree with specifically. And if you'd like to support my work, please take a look at my Patreon link in the description with tiers from just $4 a month, including the after-party live streams and access to the channel's Scratching Post Discord community on all tiers. We're having a spooky party game after party this week, and hopefully it takes your mind off the impending US elections. Take care, and I'll see you all soon. Bye!